Hello. Am I on? I'm on. Good. Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I thought I'd show how current I am by starting off with a quote from Charles Dickens. Because I think, being a planner today, it theoretically should be a brilliant time to be a planner. You have access to tools and information that planners of yesteryear could only dream of. But strangely, it's also a really awful time to be a planner because there are so many other people trying to dominate the dialogue that occurs between consumers and brands using new tools that you have less control over. When I started at Ogilvy back in the early 80s, we used to sit around saying, if only we knew who was buying this stuff that we're advertising. The Nielsen data for CPG sales was bi-monthly in those days. So you'd get one figure for 2 months sales about 3 months after the event. Now, of course, today you can get almost instantaneous feedback. You know who's buying the product, you know what they watch, you know what they read, you know who they talk to. So you should be really enjoying yourselves. But it seems like it's got a bit harder recently, and we'll talk about why that is. So I'm going to very quickly run through 6 reasons why I think strategists aren't having as big an impact on the client's bottom line as perhaps they would like to. So the first one is thinking too big. And I spend a lot of time helping to run a business called the Henley Centre, which some of you will be familiar with, others less so. The full name previously was the Henley Centre for Forecasting. And the idea of this business was it would help clients take a view on all the issues just coming up, all the future challenges and opportunities for their brand. And we had a lot of clients who every year at the sort of annual board presentation, we'd go in and talk to them about all the things that are going to happen, all the things that they needed to worry about. And we do the show, and at the end they say, thanks very much, see you in 12 months. And when I left the Henley Centre, I was asked to write an article for Management Today magazine, and they said, can you sum up what it was like trying to engage with boards about all these issues that are coming up in the future. And this was the headline that they wrote on the article. I showed them the future and they ignored it. Because if you talk about things that aren't currently an issue, it's really hard to get the clients to engage with it. They're so busy dealing with the short to medium term, very, very hard to look further out. And I think that's more so today than ever. And I'm not sure that our agency planners enjoy quite the power over boards that they used to either. And there's the legendary story about JWT inventing Mr. Kipling in order to sell more flour. Actually deriving the business strategy for a whole new business. I think today we're probably not being asked to have quite such an impact on the client's business. There are many other people advising on those bigger strategic decisions. Now, on the other hand, thinking too small is a problem. Advertising is probably less important to your client than it is to you. It may be 10, 15, 20% of what they worry about, but the other 80% is probably more urgent and more important. So being too obsessed with your bit of the pie is very dangerous. And as Peter just said, you need to understand the broader impact on the client's business of all the other things going on. You need to spend time with the client in the factory, reading around the marketplace. And actually the 4 Ps, it's a bit discredited. The old model of, what are the 4 parts of the marketing mix, which is a phrase you don't hear as much these days. It's probably more important today than it's ever been because all those things are becoming interrelated in a way they didn't used to be. Because we've got a multi-channel, always-on world, product, price, promotion, and place are all interacting with each other in very, very complex ways. So you can't just think about the comms bit. You've got to think about the entire marketing machine and how it all fits together. Third issue is thinking too parochially, which is not quite the same as thinking too small. And I've always loved this quote from Arthur Schopenhauer, who was a German philosopher. And he said, every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. And I think that is particularly true of people who live in London. I think it's particularly true of those who work in the creative industries. We are in a bit of a bubble. And I'm not going to ask you to actually do this, but were I to ask you to do this, I could guess what the result might be. And last year I was doing some work with Omnicom, and I was in Omnicom HQ down on Bankside the day that the Brexit vote came in. And it felt like somebody had died that morning. It was I was absolutely overwhelmed by the complete sense of grief and despair in the place. And it just struck me that, a vast majority, well, not a vast majority, a majority of the British people had voted for a particular outcome. But nobody in the part of the business that I was working with at the time could understand it. They really, really couldn't understand it at all. And I thought that was a bit worrying for people who are meant to understand consumers. They may understand the people they work with better than the great British public. Fourth and fifth, thinking too digitally and thinking too short term. And again, Peter's touched on this. I put these two together because I think this has been driving this. They're twin problems that need to be resolved somehow. I've touched on this. We should be in this digital nirvana at the moment. We've got loads more data, so we know everything about everyone, and we've got loads more channels, so we can talk to people all day long, anywhere and everywhere. So digital should have made marketing a brilliant thing in today's world. The reality of what digital's done to marketing in my life, and it may not be the same in yours, is this is the kind of volume of communications I'm getting. If I'm thinking about going out to eat tonight, I can come across endless discounts about how I can get meals out. And these are sent to me in great volume. I want to buy some wine. Everyone's got the same deal coming to me. I want to buy some clothes. Everyone's got the same deal coming to me. It does seem very odd that we've got all this fantastic, rich data, and it goes into this great big machine, and we are in the midst of a great big machine here, and everything that pops out the other end is either 10% off or a free cup of coffee. That isn't this personalized digital future that we were promised. And something's not quite right in how it's going. This has been touched on, the IPA report into the danger of short-termism. We're stuffing more and more money into these short-term tools, which is detrimental to long-term business health. And we have to ask ourselves, how did sales promotion get so sexy? Because actually most digital is sales promotion. That's what it is. It's a push to purchase. Now, back in the 80s when I worked in Ogilvy's and BBH, advertising were the cool, strategic, bright guys. Any money left over after we've spent it all on our fantastic TV ads went to sales promotion. And these were the slightly dodgy guys with the gold bracelets, who'd knock up a bit of sales activation activity. Now, here we are in 2017, advertising in danger of turning into a computer system. The really cool place, this is Google HQ up in King's Cross. These are the cool guys now. Something's happened, it's switched. And we're all slightly in awe of this at the expense of where we used to be as an industry. Now, despite all that, the relevance revolution hasn't really happened. And despite the data, despite the channels, all of this wonderful intelligence and tools we have, we seem to have managed to move from a world of direct marketing where you get a 4% response rate, which was always pretty rubbish, to an average online click-through of 0.01%. Highly personalized, targeted, relevant communications. Fantastic. It's not quite working. And actually, what we're doing is creating a whole load of sandwich boards. We're walking around and plonking things in front of people in the hope that it might trigger them to buy something. Now, clearly, there's a bit more science to it than that, but that's what a lot of it looks like. There's huge scope to actually use all this data to make things better. And this is a survey from AMIA, which is where I worked until recently, the owners of Nectar, and we asked loads of people, does giving all this data to companies actually make life any better? Are you getting better offers? Are you getting better communications? Only 8% of people said, by sharing all this information, the world's got better. So something's a bit broken. If you're interested, I've written an article called Oops, Your Algorithm is Showing, which is a kind of analysis of why we've got to this place, which was published in the Marketing Society magazine. Now, this digital thing is also impacting our lives in many other ways. The language we're speaking is being heavily influenced by tech speak. And I don't know how many of these phrases you use, but I'm sure you use some. The phrase use case. I hate this phrase. That means somebody's invented something and they're trying to justify how it will be used. Programmatic, minimum viable product. Sprints and scrums, which are techniques for technology development. APIs, monetizing the data. I mean, these are all hideous phrases. They're not consumer phrases, they're not relationship phrases, but they are phrases which we are using every day as we lose touch with the customers we're trying to talk to. So we've got to make sure we're using all this tech and data to do things for our customers, not to them. And I think the balance has shifted a bit towards us sort of sitting there doing things to them. And we are obsessed with efficiency in this modern world. Saving nanoseconds, making everything frictionless is the model. And I just wonder whether that's ultimately where we want to get to. This is a picture of my son's birthday a little while ago. And his various aunties and uncles around the world obviously had some automatic alert on their calendar that said it's Tom's birthday. So they went onto Amazon. And what he got was a whole load of brown boxes full of brown paper. Somewhere within was some kind of toy. No handwritten messages, no wrapping paper, no love, no joy. I wish they hadn't bothered, as did he. Efficient, they ticked the box, done that, sorted out his birthday. The end result on him, not really noticed. So friction's a really interesting subject, that actually brands need friction to have a relationship. But so much of what's being talked to at the moment is about getting rid of friction, making life efficient. So you can now sit at home, you can sit on the sofa and say, Alexa, send a pizza. And some idiot on a bike will ride up to your house with a pizza, slightly lukewarm, and you can sit and eat it. And then you can say, Alexa, send new clothes. You can have a frictionless life now. I'm not sure that's what most people want, and I'm not sure that's the role that brands, a world where brands are going to survive. So one of the roles we all have to think about is, what's the good friction in our brand and how do we exploit it in this world where it's all about saving nanoseconds? The final point is about, are we measuring and analysing the right stuff? Are we using the right metrics? Are we using the right data? There's ever such a lot you can find out about somebody. And here's a few things. What I'm thinking, where I am, what I'm interested in, what I watch, what I buy, what I read, what I do, who I talk to, what I aspire to, what I'll do next, and so on and so on. So that's me. Most data sets are a tiny, tiny fraction. So, I'm slightly guilty. I spend a lot of time at Dun Humby and AMIA, where we have big, vast data sets of what you buy from loyalty data. But actually, it's not everything you buy. It's only the stuff you buy from the retailers in that scheme. So the biggest data sets in the country are tiny. We've all got hysterical recently about location-enabled marketing. We know where they are. We can send them relevant messages. Well, and that's a piece of information. But all of these are tiny subsets of the whole. So we mustn't get carried away in too, accepting that we understand customers based on these little fractional pieces of information. And if you look at the information you've got about me, actually it probably suggests I look like this, because you haven't got a full picture, so your marketing isn't going to be relevant. And one of the things brands have got to get their head around, and this gets a bit techie, but there's a whole load of legislation coming about the way you can use data and what you can do with it and how you can manage it. The way we talk about segmenting customers is going to have to change. Now, this is a bit simplistic, but we used to segment on socio-economic grade. You've got loads of money because you're a professional. Then we got excited about where you live because it gives us a bit of context. In the 80s, then we started asking people who they thought they were, but that didn't work terribly well. So then we moved on And we're currently about here, which is we're very excited because we know what you do. We know everything about you. We've got your loyalty data, got your Google searches, and so on and so forth. The next step, just squeezes on, is that the consumer will be what they choose to let you know. And if you don't think all this legislation and the consumer attitudes towards data sharing are unimportant, you need to read up quick. And if you haven't got your privacy and your permissions and your preferences sorted, if you haven't got a dialogue with your customers, they're not going to tell you anything. And therefore, you probably won't know much. So it will get even worse. Now, in terms of what we measure, finally, we need to be wary of worshipping false gods. I don't know if you've read, there's been several academic studies now around Fitbits and fitness devices. The truth is they don't help you get fit. They help you make this number get bigger. Whether it's the right number or not, nobody knows. And actually, it seems to suggest that by setting yourself a target and getting to it, you then sit down and say, Alexa, send a pizza, which is probably the wrong thing to be doing. You know, likes and lots of other metrics in this digital world probably aren't as useful as we think they are. Wait and see, it's early days, but clearly there's a lot of debate about the metrics in the digital world that we need to work out. And strangely, you know, we've gone from a world where we used to measure success on intermediate variables. And I spent hours arguing about brand awareness and brand image, and they're all going up and everything's fine, but the sales, well, they'll follow. And now we're in a world where we're measuring sales because it's really easy, because we put an ad and then we watch the sales chart go up in real time, and we're forgetting about all those other intermediate variables, which are the important ones to understand how we got there and whether we're destroying the brand or not. So it's been an interesting shift over the last few years. So the future, well, back to best of times, worst of times, it is a brilliant time because the what's possible is now much greater than what's understood, what's wanted, and what's needed. We can do pretty much anything. If you decide what it is you want to do with your customers, what you want to say to them, the sort of interaction you want to have with them, somebody can help you create it. And that's very important to remember, because Walt Disney said years ago, you know, if you can dream it, you can do it. Well, we're kind of there now. But it's not your job to work out how to do it. Your job is to have the dream. Because there's a million people who can help wire it all up and make all these messages go in the right places. So I think I'm saying elevate yourselves out of the detail. So to try and sum it up, don't try and boil the ocean and know everything, because you'll probably disenfranchise your client. Plan and integrate your comms solutions with all the other marketing leaders, because you can't look at comms in isolation today. Get out of London and get out of the digerati bubble. Focus on the longer-term success of the brand, building on what Peter said. Don't let digital make your strategy too efficient. Efficiency is the death of brands. Measure everything and talk to the consumers. Don't guess. Don't spy either, because you won't be able to soon. Dream what might be, should be, best for your consumers, and then worry about how you're going to do it. Don't start with the technology and say, how am I going to use this fantastic new piece of kit? Because it's very, very tempting. And finally, take back ownership of the consumer relationship. Somebody's got to stand up and say, this is what the consumer wants and this is how they want to be dealt with. Thank you very much. All right.